Thank you, Steve. Imagine my surprise with retail and QSR experience when they asked me to do pharma as my first show. So this is great, right? New topics. I am super excited to be here with a good friend and Jennifer Tolley, who is the head of media from UCB. You can introduce yourself better than I can. So give the people what they want. Who are you? Sure. What are you working on?
So first and foremost, that's not my title. I am the head of Omnichannel and digital marketing, part of which is media. So that's not true, but it's not 100% true. So I lead Omnichannel and digital marketing at UCB. Part of my role is Omnichannel strategy and activation. So that's non-personal planning, media. That's our CRM efforts through Salesforce Marketing Cloud. That's next best action for marketing and dynamic targeting for our field, really complementing everything the field's doing and creating a surround sound around our sales reps. That's a piece of it, and then a piece of my role is all things omnichannel transformation. Prior to joining UCB, I began my career in the agency side and media, so I'm very familiar with what a lot of you people in this room do, and I've actually worked with some of you. And then just prior to UCB, I worked for GSK. I was in brand marketing for many years, and then I led all things content for a while.
So a wealth of experience. And you've only been at UCB for a couple months now, right? 6 months or so?
Yep. So I joined UCB in July of last year, so 6-7 months.
So we've been talking about digital transformation a lot and how we can catch up as an industry to what consumers' expectations are. And really at the core of any company's digital transformation is their data. And we've been talking about the death of the third-party cookie for 5 years now or so, and I feel like it's probably going to happen sometime this year. So what have you guys been doing to prepare for that in a cookieless environment?
Yeah, so UCB's been on a digital business transformation journey for the last 5 years or so, and a piece of that is internalizing all of our data. So having first-party data, we've already talked about that. I feel like most pharma is working on that. So I inherited a ton of data and a ton of technology when I started 7 months ago. And the interesting thing is, I feel like it was kind of a land grab. Like, get it all. We need all the data, but like, what are we actually gonna do with it? Do we need all of this data? What's the data's utility? You know what I mean? It's kind of a question in my mind. At the same time, internalizing it really is the only way. So making sure our websites are tagged appropriately, making sure our media channels, all of our placements are tagged so we can capture that engagement data. But do we actually need it all? What's there? Is the data in a clean place where we can actually use it, like leveled appropriately so the data talks to the data? Are HCPs mastered in such a way that they engage on our website? And we know that that's HCPX, and then HCPX also opened an email. Is that data connected? And that's some of the work that we're doing now, is to really clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, people say clean data, like they're just throwing out the term, right? So what does clean data mean to you? Do you guys have a qualifications or a process that you go through to say, this data is clean, but this data is not, this data is usable, this data is not?
Yeah. So ultimately, clean data is data being able to talk to data to inform your next decision. So as I mentioned earlier with next best action and dynamic targeting for the field, what has a healthcare professional engaged with in the past that might indicate that they would engage again in the future and ultimately prescribe one of our products? But the data has to talk to the data. It has to be leveled appropriately, right? And one thing that when I first came in, we're beginning to capture all of our non-personal data. So like our media agencies provide us with this data to pull into our data warehouse. However, what are we doing with it? And what exactly happens once it hits our walls? And is it clean? Like, is it everything? So we were finding that there were some gaps in the data. Like, it's not truly representative of everything that we're doing online. And to a certain extent, that's a little bit scary. So I think a gap for us is data stewardship, honestly. And there's a role of a data steward within our media agencies to make sure that the data is clean before it gets to us. There also needs to be a role within, not my team, but our data team within UCB to catch those things. Is the data truly whole? Which we're kind of working through that right now.
And what about kind of even just the formatting or the structure of it all, right? So are you getting things from the agency that doesn't match how your internal processes are set up? And how do those two things talk to each other?
Great question. So another thing that I inherited, so at first, our data scientists internally are saying, hey, we need the data in this exact format. So they go to our agencies and say, here's the Excel file, essentially. Here's the columns that we need. Here's the column headers that we need. Here's the type of information that we need. they go to the agencies and say that, and the agencies say, yeah, okay, we can do that, but it's going to take us hours. So our agency scope hours are through the roof solely because they're trying to format it according to what we say we need. And ultimately, it was not data leveling, but talking at different levels, right? The data scientist says, we need it this way. The media agency is like, well, we can only provide it this way. How do we meet in the middle? And it's a matter of getting the right leaders in the room to align on what that middle is. And so now we're using technology to help reformat the data so that agencies don't have to spend that time. It happens internally, and that also removes the risk of human error that agencies were going through trying to like copy and paste columns, you know?
So you're working out of Excel, I imagine,
exactly.
right?
Is that not terrifying? Yeah.
It's all held together by, you know, bubble gum and toothpicks sometimes.
Seriously, like nobody wants me doing that. No one's like immune to human error, right? But there's so much opportunity for that if you're using Excel. So yeah.
Yeah. So, do you really then need all of this data, right? You've been saying, hey, as we prepare for this cookieless environment, there's like a mad grab to capture everything we have possible. It's like, I need everything in my sphere of influence. Is that not the best strategy? No. Do you need all of it? How are you prioritizing what you're telling your agency and what you're telling your data scientists to prioritize so you actually activate upon it?
Yeah. No. So in short, no, you definitely don't need all the data. And the deeper that I get into the data archives of what we have in our data warehouses, the more I'm realizing like, hey, we probably don't need that. I think what I would say is twofold. One is, as you think about your KPIs and what you report on in terms of your own success as it relates to omnichannel and just like business objectives, if the data supports telling that story, yep, you need it. Or in terms of your customer experience, what is the ideal customer experience that you want to give your HCPs or your patients? Does the data enable you to do that? Then yes, you need it. But otherwise, there's all this ancillary data that you probably don't need. And from a compliance standpoint, that increases your risk. The more data you have, the more of a risk your business is in, you know, so, or a risky situation. So less is more for sure, but be intentional about it. Either, you know, making sure that it helps tell a KPI story or helps you deliver the best possible customer experience.
Do you have a recent example where you're kind of getting your hands dirty, you're in all of this data and you say, wow, I don't need this type of data and instead I'm going to prioritize this? Is there an example that comes to mind where you're kind of deprioritizing functions in an effort to kind of save resources and efficiencies?
Not really that we've deprioritized thus far. I don't think we've gotten there, honestly. I think right now we're kind of inventorying everything that exists.
Got it.
But I think we are in the process of reevaluating what our KPIs are. So that's another thing that I inherited when I joined UCB was all of our KPIs. And because we've been on a digital business transformation journey, all the KPIs ladder up to that. However, they're not things that we within the business use to optimize. So what is the point? Like, shouldn't we be reporting at a brand level and then up through the therapy areas, up through our most senior leaders within, you know, our USLT and up to our executive committee? Shouldn't we be reporting on things down here all the way up? So the things that we're optimizing based off of are the things that our C-suite executives also, it's meaningful to them too. And so one example I would say, we previously, or currently, it's evolving, but we measure digital engagement from our HCPs, so digitally engaged HCPs. However, that definition methodology is fundamentally flawed, in my opinion. It existed the way it did for a reason, and that helped us as a business when it was created, but now there's a better way to do it. So the definition is really, really granular. So it's like an HCP who opened an email, clicked on the email, and took an action on your website. An HCP who attended your webinar in full. But at the same time, and my question to our executive committee when I saw that was like, I have a crazy idea, you guys. What if somebody opens an email and it has all of the content that they want and they don't need to click?
So they had to do all of those things to be digitally engaged?
To be digitally engaged, yeah. I'm like, wait, give me some credit where credit's due. They opened my email, that's really great. Maybe they saw the information they needed. Or another idea, like, oh, they went to the webinar, but life happens, their kid got sick, they couldn't watch the whole thing. We should still get some credit for that, right? But the way it stands right now, the definition of digitally engaged HCP is so small that I can't use that to optimize off of. Right. That's just kind of like, okay, yeah, we report that to the executive committee. So we need to evolve our KPIs to allow us to Like, we are optimizing within the business things that matter to our executives.
It's like they're intentionally trying to make your heart as difficult as possible, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yes.
Yeah. So, it came to the point where a lot of the KPIs that you're focused on, it's not what you're actually reporting up to your internal stakeholders. So, are you at a point where they're now talking the same language, or are you still going through internal education about what omni-channel and a digitally enabled HCP actually means?
Yes. No, there's a lot of education. If you ask people across the entire enterprise within UCB what omnichannel means, everybody has a different definition, and I bet everybody in this room can agree within their own organization. So defining that as an organization has been super, super important. And also level setting that, like, I'm not here to compete with the field. My team's role is not to take sales reps' jobs. My team's role is to complement everything that the field is doing, because we all know, media people in the room, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So, like, essentially over time, you and I talk today, you guys remember maybe one thing that I say, but by the end of the day, you've forgotten everything because life happens. You've listened to everything else, right? Same thing is true for my role and what we do for our organization, which is the sales rep goes in to see the HCP today, and then they won't be back for a month. How do we make sure that the physician is reminded in a meaningful way along their journey, so that when the sales rep goes back in a month, the sales rep is starting at, like, 30% message retention, not having to, like, start from ground zero with the HCP.
So you have to think about what you're putting out there to enable your reps just as much as how you're targeting these HCPs.
Yeah, and it all needs to be consistent and coordinated, right? It's so critical that we're not having one conversation with the field and then separately we're sending an email that's incongruous to what you're saying in the field, right?
Yeah. Do you have any examples or tips of how you can maintain that consistency, right? So the sales reps are saying the same thing as your messaging. I mean, is there training that you do with your sales reps, or do you get their information from them and then that's what goes into your media channels?
So from a content standpoint, the content is relatively consistent. I'll say we're probably not yet, we're getting there, but we're not quite at a point yet from an omni-channel standpoint to be able to create content that's truly customized and personalized according to segmentation, according to personas, et cetera. We're not quite there yet, but at the same time, the e-detail, like what the sales rep goes and uses digitally to speak to the physician, that matches the banners, matches the emails. Are they personalized? No, but all that matches. I think where we're using data to really connect the dots is through next best action and dynamic targeting, which is essentially AI and technology driving. We know a physician engaged with this, therefore we should send them this email next. Or we know a physician just had a sales rep conversation, therefore we should target them with a banner over here, and doing so programmatically at a truly N of one level, or as close to. I think we're there from a data and a media standpoint. We're not quite there from a content standpoint yet.
Yeah. So let's dive into the content aspect. And I love that you talked about the consistency of the content, even though if it wasn't personalized. So in your job, and as you're thinking about how am I reaching these HCPs and how am I reaching them across every channel, is consistency more important than personalization so they can retain the information and all of the messages that they're just getting inundated with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think they're both important. I think consistency, ultimately, anyone who's in pharma understands that from a compliance standpoint, there's only like one way that you can actually say your claim. You have this one claim, you can only say it one way, and it carries all of these different elements of fine print, right? So I think that's always going to be the case. I think look and feel should be consistent, right? So like your brand colors, those are basics. We're all in marketing, we get that stuff. I think where personalization comes into play is I prefer a more direct call to action. You prefer a more question call to action.
Right.
I prefer a female image in my emails. You prefer a picture of the sun in your emails,
Are you a solo practitioner or are you in a whole conglomerate?
Exactly, right, exactly. So I think to a certain extent, we know enough about them to know, like, channel affinities. We know that dermatologists are more likely to engage in one area, whereas rheumatologists are more likely to engage in another to inform our channel mix. But I think from a content standpoint, personalization comes down to truly those little tweaks that ultimately make a difference when it comes to people actually engaging. And if we have data that we know you prefer the picture of the sun, why are we sending you emails with pictures
Right.
of men or women? Let's
Yeah.
send you pictures of the sun.
Yeah, know
you
what I want. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Know your audience. Yeah.
Because they're probably getting that, as consumers of other industries too, right? I mean, they're going to
Right.
be overwhelmed with the number of things in retail or food or hospitality that is completely
Yes.
personalized to them. So they almost expect the same things
do.
from you as well.
100%. I forget if it was Gartner. I'm trying to think. There was some big study done recently, and it's like over 60% of physicians expect. It's not that they want it, it's not that they desire it. They fully expect customized and personalized experiences. And so how can we get closer to that? It'll never be truly N of one.
Right.
I mean, kind of is, like you can say Dr. Everhart in your email or Dr. Tolley in your email. But other than that, it's not ever going to be like truly N of one, but how can we get closer to that? Because that's what they expect. And we're all consumers too, right? Like I've seen a picture of a dress on an ad and I'm like, I don't have time to buy that yet, but I hope I see that ad again and I know I'm going to, So like that's effectively what we're doing.
The Instagram algorithm does get you.
It's true. It's sneaky. That's where this came from. Yep. For being honest.
The affiliate link is there too, so you can share it as well. Yeah.
Right.
So as we talk about, and the content personalization, right? I think everyone really strives to be one-to-one. It's the Narnia that as marketers we all want to get to. But to your point, maybe we're chasing a pipe dream, right? Is one-to-one ever going to be reachable? And is group targeting okay? Can that get the job done and meet the HCP's expectations?
Right. And I think to a certain extent, depending on where a brand is in its life cycle, awareness is fine, right?
Yeah.
Generalized messaging, generalized blanket targeting, that's fine to a certain extent. UCB has a few products currently in launch mode for rare diseases. So if you think about how few patients you have and how few HCPs you have treating those things, that's where it becomes super important that we don't want to just blanket our messages, and we also want to make it feel more personalized anytime anybody engages with our brand. So I don't know that we probably are kind of chasing Narnia, but I do think
Dream big.
Yeah, exactly. Dream big. But where we can, we're using technology to help us get better and be more efficient in our content creation. So a few examples of things that UCB is doing right now, and I'm sure those of you in pharma are familiar with modular content, or not pharma, honestly.
Is everyone familiar with modular content? Hands?
Yeah, ish. Okay.
Ish.
So the premise is you send an email, you have 10 different subject lines to choose from, 6 different images, 3 different body copies, et cetera, all of which can ride along together. There's all sorts of business rules for what can live together, what must always live together, what absolutely cannot go together from a compliance standpoint. So content is assembled in a modular way, right? There's 2 elements to this. One piece is really like self-service. Have a tool create the content up front. So essentially, if you approve your content through MLR in a modular way, on the back end, a tool creates that content. So right now, current state, developers are hands-on keyboard, HTML coding every single banner, every single email. Think about how inefficient that is. So my past life experience at GSK, I established our internal agency, I owned digital production, and part of our long-term strategy from a talent standpoint for my teams in India was no longer are they going to be hands-on keyboard HTML coding. A tool's going to be doing that, and they're going to be doing QA. So what do we need to be doing from a talent build standpoint for my teams in India to get them there, right? So a piece of it's that. A piece of it is dynamic. So through Salesforce Marketing Cloud does the smart stuff for us. It pulls together AI algorithms to understand you like the picture of the sun, I like the picture of the lady, and therefore the email deploys at the same time, but you get the sun and I get the lady, right? According to how we've engaged in the past. But we have to, I forget who said it earlier, that AI is not taking our jobs, but it's taking jobs of people who don't use AI. This is a prime example where we need to be harnessing the power of technology to be more efficient. Because to Dustin's earlier point, customer expectations are up, budgets are down. How do we create more and be more personalized, but do so efficiently?
Do more
it's
with
hard.
less, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's hard.
So we've talked about the data structure, the foundation. We've talked about all the ways that you're going to create the content. Before we open it up to the audience Q&A, we have to talk about the channels you're using, to power and to actually get your message out there. Are there targeting tactics or channels that you typically gravitate towards when you're trying to reach the HCP?
So one of the most critical components of what I do especially targeting HCPs, is making sure that we are targeting as granularly as possible. Because if you think about the message that an HCP can receive, it's much more scientific in nature. They are way smarter than me. I don't understand half of what we're telling them, right? Because I'm just a patient, I'm just a consumer. But with that in mind, we have to be really granular in how we target HCPs, because if not, we run the risk of a consumer inadvertently seeing an ad that's way more scientific that they don't understand, right? And that's not fair to them, and that's not a good customer experience. So with that in mind, anywhere that we can target, like to the NPI level, truly the N of one physician level, those are the things that we're doing more of. I would say programmatic is an easy one, whether that's banners or video. That's really, really important, especially as it relates to retargeting through our next best action engine. That's a big one. I would say omni means all. So like when I first got to UCB, we were not active at all on social. So Meta, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, et cetera. We didn't have any activity there. Why not? Our HCPs are consumers as well. We should be promoting there, you know? So being where they are is important.
That's such a good grounding, you know, of you're saying, hey, I'm the consumer too. I'm not going to be as smart as the HCP, but at the end of the day, HCPs are consumers too, right?
Yeah.
Like we kind of forget that when we get absorbed in all of the day-to-day that we have to do. We'll open it up to some questions here.
Yep, we have questions.
Oh, hands everywhere.
Right over here. Oh boy.
You're a popular woman today, Jennifer.
Or I'm confusing. I don't know. Maybe both.
I'll go with channels since we were just talking about that. Hi, I'm Jessie McKeesey, Spring and Bond. So you talked about building the plans, omni-trigger type channels. How are you helping internal teams, your media agencies, navigate building plans that include omni-trigger channels, like paid, programmatic, with those that don't, those that will never be MPI targeted, but still have a value?
So I would say twofold. One, channel affinity becomes super important for those things that never will be a part of those programs, because if we know physicians, I'm making this up, but like dermatologists tend to be more predisposed to like journals, to read journals, they want to pick up something. That's never going to be linked to trigger-based advertising, right? But channel affinity helps me make that business case that we still should have presence in those journals, So I think that's a big one. And I think, too, there's a ton of education to be done, honestly, still. And we're still on that journey within UCB. But understanding capabilities, where they are today and where they want to go, or where we want to be, has been a really, really big piece, because there's a lot of people within UCB and pharma in general that are not digital. They're not innately digital, like they didn't grow up in the digital world that we're all living in right now. So making sure that we're building those capabilities behind the scenes so that they understand the importance has been huge. And we're already making headway there, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Hi, great content. You've mentioned next best action a few times, and I was curious, how much of that is, programmatic in terms of like if A, then B, versus sort of determining based on goals, like that the machine algorithm is working to figure out what the next best action is. My experience is we think next best action a lot, and it turns out being a series of just rules that teams implement. I don't even know how realistic that is in the efforts that you're trying to do. And then the last part of my question, so how much of that continuum is rules-based versus sort of letting the algorithms figure it out? And then second, what is your AI engine? What is the engine that's driving the next best action?
Yeah, sure. So to your first question, it is true as close to real time as we can get. So there's essentially a feed every single week, which is not real time, but it's as close as we can get with the data in and data out. There is a feed informing those things, and then the decisions are made either within SFMC or through our ad serving partners to enable that, but it's on a weekly basis is how frequently the data is transferred. At the same time, there is real-time algorithmic decision making behind the scenes as it relates to that content, like what I was sharing within SFMC for Erin likes a son, I like a woman, like those kinds of things do occur real time, and that's algorithmic. What I would say is, in general, the way the algorithms say this physician should see a banner and they should see banner A. This physician should receive an email and she should receive the picture of the woman, those kinds of things, those are done real time. And what we've seen is significantly higher engagement as a result of that. So it's not necessarily just business rules towards an end goal, although that's the first part of machine learning is the business rules, you know. And then the tools, so we currently use, there's quite a few in this space. We currently partner with ZS, which is not a technology company at all, but they support us in the creation of the algorithms, et cetera. And our intention long-term is for us to internalize the engine itself, actually. So they're helping us build the tool and build the algorithms. But then the intention is that within our data warehouse over the next few years, we will internalize that sort of as a CDP, our own CDP.
We have to wrap, but thank you so much, Jennifer and Erin.
Sure.